Wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet before we go ahead and get started. I know it is early today. We're about an hour early, I think. And that's because I had to make some adjustments to my schedule. But my goodness, is this working? Are we connected here? There it is. All right, now it's finally showing up. Hello, there it's live. Hello, everybody. We've got... It looks like it's working. I see some people in the chat. Shout out to Mark Owens. We've got Vienticus Prime. Just Cause is there. And it looks like the stream is alive and well. All right, so kind of a little bit of a rough opening there. But hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Govea. I'm a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group. And today we're talking about January 6th because it's Insurrection Week and we're waiting anxiously for the January 6th Fake Select Committee to come out on Thursday and rub all of our noses in this same saga that they've been doing for the last 500 days or so. And so we yesterday went through the mind map in great detail to assemble all the various aspects, all the pieces of the puzzle all into one. And so we're going to go back through that today because it's an iterative process. We're constantly adding to this because we've got that big debut coming up. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. If you're like a Democrat, you've been gearing up for this. If you're on the committee yourself, you've probably got those elastic bands, you're stretching out. You see Jamie Raskin out there is trying all sorts of different creams and oils for his hair. And they're really, it's like that scene out of Rocky. And so they're gearing up for it. We're gearing up for it. We're going to have a conversation today about who's actually covering it. Brian Stelter is very irritated that those people over there at Fox News are not going to be covering this fake committee hearing on Thursday. Of course, we'll cover it because we're just going to lampoon them, really. I mean, is really what this all comes down to. But I understand some conservative people in the media are just saying, we're not even going to talk about it. What a waste of time. Because really, it has been a waste of time, right? They already tried to impeach Donald Trump. They've already indicted a bunch of people. They're prosecuting the people who were actually there. They subpoenaed phone records for everybody. They are perverting the entire justice system in order to gain an advantage. It's one political party going after another political party, using the criminal levers of power to do it. And that's kind of an amazing thing to think about happening in the United States. But here we are. And so if you want to follow along at home, the way to do that is by going to j6mindmap.com. And if you go there, you'll see that it looks just like this. There on the screen, you'll see our friend, the podium thief, who almost took control of America. He's there front and center, and he's going to be the symbolic figurehead, at least for, the time being. We zoom out on this thing. Yesterday, we explored all the different tentacles of this mind map. And you'll notice if we zoom out and zoom out like we're leaving the galaxy, we see a lot of green boxes here. That's all new stuff that I want to spend a quick couple minutes on today. And so we'll bounce around through it shortly. You'll notice that we are an hour early. I have a hard stop, R&R law firm meeting at 4:30 here today in Arizona. And then I've got my men's group. So we're trying to compress a show in. We'll see as much as we can, what we can get to today here. But I think we can make it happen. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. So the big news of the day is Steve Bannon news. And that's always fun. So let's start there. If we zoom in, remember that Steve Bannon is being prosecuted here for contempt of court, or for contempt of Congress, really. He was ordered to show up in front of this stupid committee and sit down and talk to them, and he didn't do it. So they said, well, you violated the law. They referred it over to Merrick Garland, the U.S. Attorney General, and he took it from there, indicted him. And so Steve Bannon is now facing a criminal prosecution for 2 counts, contempt of Congress for not providing testimony, and another 1 count for not providing documents. And we spent a lot of time on this channel recreating and analyzing what's been going on over the last several months. But his trial is scheduled for July 18th, I think is what I recall from yesterday. And that's like right around the corner. So we've got about just under a month until we're going to be seeing a whole new trial here. And I doubt it gets pled out, or I doubt it gets dismissed. I mean, we may actually see a trial here. And if it's going to go anything like the Michael Sussman trial went, then I think we sort of have an idea of how this outcome is going to go. And that's very concerning, which means now we're taking this stuff up to appeals court levels and all this stuff. So it's going to be fun. But anyways, as the trial heats up, I went to the court docket. Still not a lot of activity over there on the federal court docket, but there was a news story that leaked out, and I've got some opinions on this. But there was a story that came out today that Steve Bannon is now subpoenaing additional members of Congress. And so let's see what the story says. This came over from CNN. Now, my commentary on this is that I get irritated when CNN breaks these stories. It's like, why is CNN breaking this story? Why is Steve Bannon not breaking this story? Why is, his favored news agency not, first of all, his organization, he's got a big media presence, but, why isn't this going over to Breitbart or something like this? Like, why does CNN break these stories? And I'm pretty sure they did. I couldn't find the actual subpoenas. I couldn't find any. What I'm talking about is primary source documents, right? I want to see it from Steve Bannon and his team. Give us the story so that people out there who are favorable to you can go out and start talking favorably about it on your behalf, right? People to actually sort of be advocates. Because what happens when they don't do that is CNN takes it and they twist it into their own narrative. And so let's see what CNN does with this. But I would prefer to see the primary source documents anytime. And for some reason, lawyers and, Congress people, they sort of keep this stuff close to the chest, and then CNN's reporters get it, and then they write the story, and we don't get to see any of the underlying material. Okay, so we're going to have to, unfortunately, rely on CNN to tell us what's in these subpoenas and what all of this is about. Whereas I would just prefer Steve and his team just put the documents up there so we can see them. Now, there may be a reason why they don't want to do that. Of course, because maybe they don't want other people to see what's in the subpoenas or to anticipate what might be coming to them. But it's still something that is a little irritating because it's going to come out regardless. Okay, so why don't you take the story and craft it accordingly? But they don't do that. So CNN breaks this today, June 7, 2022. Bannon subpoenas Pelosi and the House January 6 committee members to fight contempt charges. So written by Sarah Murray over at CNN. And some of the story tells us that Bannon's attorneys are seeking to challenge the makeup. Wait a minute. Yeah, we're gonna actually go to the other part of this article here to learn more about what the subpoena entails, which, like I said, I wish we could see this originally. It says Bannon is a conservative firebrand, previously advisor to President Trump, pled not guilty to the charge. Last week, Bannon's legal team, see here, subpoenaed 16 lawmakers, and congressional staffers to testify at the July trial and to produce documents. Oh, it's old, what's good for the goose is good for the gander there. Oh, isn't it? Oh, you're going to subpoena a million different Republicans and all my people? How about I subpoena you back, buddy boy? And so Steve did that. He's got 16 of them flying around. Let's see where these are going. It says the subpoenas were aimed at all 9 members of the fake select committee, which it should be because they're all conspirators in this. It says 3 committee staffers and general counsel for the House of Representatives, Douglas Letter, which is just delicious. Isn't that just delicious? Unfortunately, we got it served through CNN, but Bannon also subpoenaed House Democratic leadership, including Pelosi and House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer and Rep. Jim Clyburn. So they all got served a bunch of subpoenas. So Nancy Pelosi sitting there in front of her Viking kitchen refrigerator, eating her ice cream that cost $35, a scoop. And she's like, oh, Steve Bannon just sent me a subpoena. This is just the worst. A spokesman for the House committee, of course, declined to comment. Spokespeople for Pelosi and Hoyer and Clyburn did not immediately respond to requests for comments. Historically, it's been a challenge to compel members of Congress to testify. Well, that's weird. Why did they compel? Why did this committee then compel a bunch of other people who are currently representatives to come and testify? Right? They sent them subpoenas to do it. It says that their legislative activity is protected under the Constitution's speech and debate clause. Look. CNN, this article journalist person obviously didn't get the memo. Nobody cares about the Constitution anymore. Okay, so just get rid of that stuff. Historically, it has been a challenge to compel, read that. In this particular case, I'm extremely confident that the staff members and members of the House would be shielded by the speech and debate clause, says Thomas Spulak, who served as general counsel to the House. Lawmakers and staffers could file a motion to quash those subpoenas on those grounds, saying, well, we're protected and you can't come after us. But that doesn't stop them from trying to go after Trump or any Republicans along the same lines. Bannon's attorneys are seeking to challenge, and this is something new from Bannon, the makeup of the House Select Committee. And this is something I've been screaming about for months now, questioning lawmakers' motives for targeting Bannon and arguing Bannon was not required to testify because of executive privilege. One of his lawyers says, quote, "I believe from the start it's purely political motive going after Bannon." Dave Scone, one of Trump's lawyers also, was there saying that. He said, if the committee truly wanted Bannon's testimony, it would not have referred him for criminal contempt charges, saying they'll never get his testimony now. I have to draw the conclusion it's purely political, is what Scone says. They're afraid of the message that Bannon puts out there. True, and he does it effectively. Other Republicans have also challenged the legitimacy of the committee, and they've refused to testify. McCarthy, who we're going to jump into next, refused to comply with the committee subpoena, claiming it was not legally valid. Former Trump advisor Navarro, talked about him earlier in the week, last week, charged with 2 counts of contempt, very similar charges to Bannon, saying that it was a kangaroo court and unenforceable. Subpoenas say they want documents as well. In the case of Reps Schiff, Pencilneck, and Jamie Raskin, Bannon's team has requested documents that pertain to their recently published books, in addition to some other things. So that's Steve Bannon, who wants those documents. And I think really what he's going to be after is, remember there was a big sort of a motion to dismiss. Do I have that saved here? I'll have to add that. Steve Bannon and his team filed a motion to dismiss the case. And one of their arguments was the idea that this was a political prosecution, sort of malicious prosecution, prosecutorial misconduct. I mean, it's illegally constituted. This is not something that is really, a common charge that you see regularly because it's such a fake scam. And we don't normally do this type of stuff in America until the very recent era, sort of post-COVID era, when everything went out the window. But we're very used to this now. And one of his arguments was that they are maliciously prosecuting me. So what is he going to be doing? Well, he wants to see all their documents and all their text messages, and he wants to see part of the discussion about the conspiracy to go after him and a bunch of other people, right? And so they're going to say all that's protected and you don't need that and it's irrelevant. And a DC circuit judge is probably going to say, they're right. You're wrong, Steve. You're a bad, bad boy. And we'll see where that goes. But we'll continue to follow that. It's actually been a little bit quiet on this Bannon front. I was looking at the court docket earlier today, and there wasn't a whole lot there. But there was something that we didn't go over, and it's actually very pertinent now. So we're going to go to Kevin McCarthy because, well, we're going to sort of bounce around with Kevin McCarthy here for a minute. I got to be very careful with those adjectives. But here you can see Kevin McCarthy has an amicus brief that he submitted in the Steve Bannon case, and we're going to go through it. Now, he submitted this sort of mid-May, and it's a friend of the court brief. He's trying to say, Judge, I've got a stake in this based on what you decide and what happens on this case. I've got to unpack this and encourage you to make a decision one way. So we're going to go through that because McCarthy submitted this in Bannon's case. But before we do, let's take a quick, just jump over to another part of Kevin McCarthy, which is down here. Because remember, folks, we're gearing up for Insurrection Night. All right, Insurrection Night is coming this Thursday. And it's going to be like the Super Bowl for the Democrats. I mean, they're all doing their hair and they're getting their makeup done. They're getting new outfits. They went, ordered stuff on Amazon. All well, I don't want to use pronouns, but all these self-identifying people are congregating together and laughing and giggling and, pillow fighting and all that stuff because they're really excited about what's going to happen on Thursday. They think that it's probably going to be like better than Top Gun or something. Well, I'm not real sure that that's going to be the case. Anyways, we'll see. But the point of this is what we're all talking about. Right? This is the big political spectacle that's going to blow the socks off everybody. And it's taking place on Thursday. And we know that from yesterday, we got introduced to the big guy who's actually producing this show. His name is James Goldston. Now, he's not a formal producer. This is not really like a movie, even though it should be. It's kind of like a fictional narrative. It's not far off from that. But James Goldston, we learned yesterday, was actually a producer over from ABC. And they had some goals. They talked about this, right? They're going to make this lively and make it a lot of fun and blah, blah, blah. Now, what we didn't know at the time is that he's actually somebody who is he has kind of a questionable relationship. So when he was there, a part of ABC as a producer working on all of these different things. Let me see. I thought I had an article here. No, that's not what I wanted. So he worked on Good Morning America. He did something with David Muir or something, right? Like, he's a big time guy. He's got all of this involvement in a lot of these shows. But he worked at ABC, and apparently he kind of covered up for somebody that we haven't talked about on this channel for a long time, but you see his photograph right here. It just keeps popping up everywhere we go. Look at this guy. Jeffrey Epstein. He's back in the picture. He's on this mind map. He's everywhere. He's on the January 6th mind map. And it's not just because I tried to put him here. This is now relevant. Why? Well, because Kevin McCarthy told us it is. Put it on Twitter. Kevin McCarthy posted this today on Twitter, and he was calling out James Goldston. He sent this letter. He actually posted this on Twitter, and we're going to take a look at the letter. But he said this on June 6th. The Democrats have turned to the former ABC News executive, James Goldston, who we'll talk about, under whose leadership ABC spiked a story on Jeffrey Epstein to choreograph their January 6th political theater. So that's a little bit of a rubbing your nose in there, isn't it? Kevin McCarthy is sort of saying, oh, this guy's trying to smear me. How about I smear you, jerk? And you see that he's actually retweeting a tweet of his. So Kevin McCarthy is saying, James Goldston, I remember that name. Didn't we send him a letter some time ago in 2019? And he's like, I think we did. He tells his aide, go check over there. And he's like, yeah, we did. I wrote that for you. He's like, was it good? He's like, yeah, it was great. I wrote it. Oh, great. Okay, go dig that up for me. I want to use it. So he goes and digs it up. And here he tells us that he sent this over to ABC. And we'll take a look at it. So back in 2019, Kevin McCarthy sends a letter to James Goldston. James Goldston, Beth Coddington's in the house. What's up, Beth? James Goldston is the producer for this fake January 6th Select Committee hoax that's going to be taking place on Thursday. Get your popcorn ready. And he apparently covered up for Epstein. Let's see what this letter says that McCarthy sent over to him. He said, Dear Mr. James Goldstein, this was back on November 17, 2019. So this is the guy who's producing, all right, this big scandal hoax thing. Says, Dear Goldstone, as you must have seen, a video has emerged from ABC News anchor Amy Robach expressing regret and frustration over ABC News executive's decision 3 years ago not to publish a firsthand account from one of Epstein's accusers. She attributes this comment to an attorney of one of Mr. Epstein's victims she obtained through her reporting, saying, there will come a day when we realize Epstein was the most prolific bad person the country has ever known. In this video, Robach remarks her evidence was collected over 3 years. Epstein was arrested July 6, 2019, and he talks about some of the heinous crimes. He says, it's unclear whether anyone thought to alert authorities over there at ABC News. But what we have seen presented to Miss Robach is evidence of human trafficking. I'm deeply concerned that the victim went to your news organization called ABC News, provided information and an interview, and then ABC News chose to bury the truth. This was a decision that was alluded to protecting powerful people and powerful interests. And he says, it's clear to me that Epstein has consequences, and says that ABC News has been enabling them. So he wanted more information. He said, Mr. Goldstone says, will ABC News provide Congress the interview with the victim? Will ABC News share what they learned about Epstein? Who was involved in deciding this story was of public interest? Can Robach expand on outside forces she mentioned? And so on. Was ABC News ever presented with additional evidence of Epstein? All of this signed by Doug Collins, ranking member in the House, Mike T. McCall, and Kevin McCarthy. Sent the letter over to Goldston. You see here, Goldston, how you say his name? And he covered up for Epstein. And now the Democrats are going to put him in charge of this little scam hoax committee. Okay. But the story doesn't stop there, because once you crack open the Epstein Pandora's box, it just keeps going and going and going. Now, there was a story that came out yesterday on the show, near the end of the show, over from the Daily Mail that I started to read and I couldn't even process what they were trying to say here because it was so stinking ridiculous. Well, guess what? I read it again, and yes, it is that ridiculous. They are still assembling this. And so it's actually related to this case through Jeffrey Epstein. So guess what? Now that Epstein's back in the picture, now that James Goldston, who's going to be conducting this J6 fake committee hearing, is in charge of conducting it, we know that he already covered up for Epstein. But guess who Epstein was involved with? This guy, Mark Middleton. Mark Middleton, guess what we know about him? Well, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. We'll take a look at this story. But this came over from the Daily Mail. Who is that gentleman I just showed you? He was a top Clinton advisor, right? Mark Middleton. That was his photograph. Died by suicide, unfortunately, back on May 7th. Very tragic when that happens. Age 59 years old, took place out in Arkansas. He was one of Bill Clinton's top advisors, as we know. But how is this related at all? Well, Jeffrey Epstein, this guy, Mark Middleton, admitted him 17 times to the Clinton White House. What? So this story just keeps, the tentacles of all of this. It's a disgusting, swampy cesspool, this whole thing. So we go through, it says, married, father of two. Sounds nice and peaceful. Lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. Shot himself. Okay, so we're not there yet. Shot himself at the Heifer Ranch in Perryville. Now, the Daily Mail went to the father and his widow, and they tried to get a Freedom of Information Act request to get some of these documents to say, what the heck happened here? But the widow and the father are fighting this. The two filed for an injunction, arguing that blocking of the footage was necessary to stop unsubstantiated conspiracy theories from moving forward. So they're trying to stop this footage from coming out. Well, that's weird. Why would you want to stop footage? I mean, certainly, look, it's your loved one, okay? Your loved one is is dead in a horrific scene. I've got some personal experience from this, and you sort of want to keep those things private, right? So you can certainly understand that. And you say, it's our affair, it's our bit. We don't want anybody to open up these old wounds. Got it. And normally, in most situations, you say, well, yeah, I mean, it looks like that person really did die by suicide. It's pretty terrible. But here, the lawsuit says that the family has been harassed by outlandish, hurtful, and unsupported and offensive online articles about Middleton and his death, which I can understand, that would be weird if these next sentences weren't in here. Perry County Sheriff Scott Montgomery, this sheriff, Scott Montgomery from Perry County, said Middleton, who recall died by suicide previously, was discovered hanging from a tree with a shotgun blast to his chest. Okay. Okay. What? How do you do that to yourself? After the petition was filed, Montgomery denied the Daily Mail's FOIA request for any of his paperwork on the case. So, look, rest in peace. I don't want to, you can cross a lot of lines there, but I mean, something doesn't add up to me. It's kind of a weird thing to be able to do to yourself. Hanging from a tree with a shotgun blast to your chest. And the sheriff is just like, wow. Yeah, he must have been in a lot of pain. Yeah. I can't believe he did that to himself. Horrible. Well, cut him down and pick up the shell casings. Let's go report this suicide to the family. Yay. All right. So, okay. So, a little bit of a tangent there, right? Now, a little bit of a tangent, right? We're talking about January 6th here. So how the heck do we get over there to Clinton offing another person connected to Epstein? Well, as I said, it's all closely related. And it's because James Goldston, the person who's going to be conducting this charade on Thursday, covered up for Epstein, who probably is still alive on an island somewhere, who may have taken out Mark Middleton, probably with Hillary Clinton as the getaway driver. Who knows? So a lot of activity going on there. Now, the Epstein cover-up saga. So we got that one. We talked about Kevin McCarthy and his reaction. Now, there was a lot of hubbub about this because very recently, Donald Trump came out and endorsed Kevin McCarthy. And look, he's going to have to do these things, right, in order to win. Kevin McCarthy is about as useless of a Republican as I can imagine. Haven't really seen much from him. I think he's still bunk bed mates with Frank Luntz over there in D.C. They probably also have pillow fights when they're not, pillow fighting with the Democrats. Strange behavior from those two. And it says that Trump came out and endorsed him nonetheless, even though both those guys hate Donald Trump. He endorsed him anyway. So, okay, whatever. Congressman Kevin McCarthy is an outstanding representative for California. Tireless advocate. He's going to work incredibly hard to stop inflation. Oh, man, what a total joke. All right, so that's Donald Trump endorsing loser Kevin McCarthy, who's been doing virtually nothing for virtually anything, right? He's getting a little bit irritated because his butt's in the fire now on this January 6th stuff, but you're going to see a lot more of that, all right? Get prepared to watch Jim Jordan, Kevin McCarthy, and all these mostly silent Republicans who for the last 500 days have been largely silent about the January 6th atrocities, what's going on to those defendants there, and pretty much just been rolling over for the Democrats every which way you turn. They're just going to come out now because their butt's in the hot seat and they're going to start, this is ridiculous. I can't believe what's happening. And blah, blah, blah. All right. So at least it's something, but that's the updates from these individuals. Speaking of politicians, here is Liz Cheney. Now, Liz Cheney also got in a little bit of hot water very recently. Do I want to go to Liz? Yeah, we'll stay with Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney also got a little bit of hot water because, remember, she's a part of this fake committee, which I always like to reference the fact that it's not legally constituted, which is why I call it fake. And here you can see the reason why I say this. It's very foundational. It's very important. Is because under HR 503, which is how they got this thing authorized, more or less, they say that it's supposed to be 13 members on the panel, 8 Democrats, 5 Republicans. If you look at the mind map, that's not close at all. In fact, it's totally lopsided. It is 7-2. And the so-called Republicans are not even Republicans. So what this means is that the committee is not legally constituted under the permissions of the law. And if you want to detail that a little bit further and follow along at home, this is at j6mindmap.com. You can go check that out if you would like to see that. But under this paperclip, it will actually show you the text. It says here, the speaker shall appoint 13 members, 5 of whom shall be appointed. This isn't discretionary. It must be done. Guess what? It's not done. Therefore, in my opinion, the whole thing's a sham and a fraud. So anyways, Liz Cheney doesn't think that. She thinks this is like a big part of her big debut and that she's going to use this to, I don't know, ride out the Trump storm and probably, come out the stronger, conservative, principled leader, 10 years from now and run for president with her daddy probably still on, life support somewhere. And she'll be back around. No doubt about it. This is a wave that she's riding, but she's catching some grief today. Now, what happened is she sent this campaign letter out to somebody who we'll learn about in a minute, but that person probably shouldn't have gotten this letter. Let's see what this letter says. It says, first of all, let's make sure we know who we're dealing with here. This person is Megan Powers. So Megan Powers, as you'll see, she actually got one of these campaign letters and says currently, I think Sunshine, previously director of ops for real Donald Trump. What does that mean? Senior advisor and press secretary for NASA, White House, NYU University. Megan Powers. Well, she got a subpoena. Not a subpoena. She got a campaign letter. Too many subpoena talks here. Megan Powers says, hey, Liz Cheney, is it standard operating procedure on your January 6th committee to ask subpoenaed witnesses for campaign contributions there, Lizzie? She got her nose rubbed in that one because, no, typically that's not okay. If you're going to be subpoenaing somebody, you don't want to send them a request to donate to your campaign fund. Just an idea. But she did that, and we'll read through what this letter says from Liz Cheney. Let's see what Liz Cheney says about herself. So she's asking people, the good people of Wyoming, They're saying they want the good people of Wyoming to say, Liz, I admire your courageous conservative leadership and would be honored to join your national campaign team. We need you in Congress, fighting off the Biden administration's worst instincts. You say, what are you talking about? You're on Team Biden, lady. What are you talking about? Okay, so she says, Dear Wyoming Americans, I represent the great state of Wyoming, but I'm also fighting for all Republicans. I'm committed to concentrating on policy-focused work. What is she talking about? Oh, gosh. So her advisors must know that she's getting skewered over this J6 stuff. They realize it. They know that they're like, she's so just, they're probably getting feedback from the actual, demographic polls that's saying that she's wasting her time on J6 stuff. So they put this in big, bold letters. What a joke. Says, rather than making a lot of noise or headlines, I'm committed to concentrating on policy-focused work. No, she's not doing, what is she doing? Do you know of any other policy she's working on other than this January 6th thing? Can you name another thing? No. Putting my principles and responsibilities first has made me an enormous target, but I will not be deterred. America needs leaders who are not afraid to do what's right regardless of the political fallout. Well, it's going to be pretty consequential for you there, Liz. You're probably not going to have a job anymore. Says that we know that bigger government rarely means better government and that the American people know how to spend their money better than an overreaching, all-controlling federal government. Well, she's part of a committee that is violating all the due process norms of a standard traditional criminal prosecution, and she's doing it on behalf of an oppositional political party. So that's weird. Sounds like an overreaching, all-controlling federal government to me. Don't know why she would say she's fighting that when she's actually really kind of the main person creating it. Strange. The Biden-Pelosi Build Back Better plan is a prime example. It's the ultimate misdirection. All right, so you can see what a stupid letter this is. And it's going to be very nice when she's no longer in Congress. And her opponent is a woman named Harriet Hageman. And so you should certainly go and donate to her instead of Liz Cheney. So that's what's going on there with Liz. Now, that's the updates from the politicians. We still see, we've got a couple green arrows down here that I wanted to reference before we move on. Because what do we have left? Yeah, actually, these are all... Yeah, we'll wrap up with the amicus brief because the amicus brief is a little heavy. But here, there was a couple other reactions that came out. Now, we know that this Insurrection Night Committee is taking place on Thursday. So today's Tuesday. We've got Wednesday. Thursday is going to be, pretty heavy. But the media is still trying to figure out what to do with this whole thing. So is this going to be wall-to-wall coverage? I mean, is this going to be like Watergate? Is this going to be like 9/11? Are we going to be seeing this wall-to-wall every single day, watching Liz Cheney and Jamie Raskin and Benny Thompson? Oh my gosh, it's like store brand Avengers or something like that. It's the worst. And they're going to come together and smash their rings together in the name of democracy or something. So the media is trying to figure out what to do about this. Fox News, as we're going to learn from Brian Stelter, not going to air it. They're just going to play Tucker Carlson. He's going to do his regular show at the regular time. Nobody's even going to care. Nobody's going to pay attention. And Brian Stelter, very unhappy about that. You can see he posted this on Twitter. He posted this on June 6th yesterday. Says, Fox News makes it official. It will not, capitalized, show Thursday's 1/6 hearing like all the other major networks. Tucker Carlson's show will air as usual. Carlson promotes conspiracy theories about the riot, which we'll probably spend a lot of time on tomorrow, exploring all of them. Calls the committee illegitimate, like me, and ridicules the committee members. Hey, that's what we do. He's very unhappy about this. Brian Stelter says Fox's top news anchors will be moved over to the Fox Business Network and they will cover the hearing there. At 8 p.m. Eastern Time, an ordinary night, Fox News has more than 3 million viewers, while Fox Business has under 100,000, which is like, I think more than Brian gets, right? Brian's like under 100, more or less, like on CNN. He's like, I think he was like in the 80 to 90,000s, like at one point. He might be up, I'm not sure. It was bad for a while. At 8 p.m., they get 3 million. So they're relegating this stuff over to Fox Business. He says, here's the language from Fox's press release. Fox News Channel's primetime programs will cover the hearings as news warrants. At 11 p.m., Gutfeld will be preempted, and Shannon Bream will anchor a 2-hour live special joined by Brett Baer and Martha McCallum. Poor Brian. Oh, poor Brian. He's just so upset about everything, you know. Anyway, so that's Brian. Very unhappy about it. And he is, of course, going to be probably hyperventilating. I mean, many of these Democrats are going to be probably brown paper bagging the whole thing, and just, you know, multiple news people just, plotting their face with all the sweat. It's going to be gross. I mean, it's just going to be gross. So come prepared for it. I'm going to try to do my best to insulate us from it. I'm going to pull it up here on the screen and we'll just watch it live. And we'll just make fun of these dorks. But it's going to be good. Now, while many people are very excited about this, some of the more senior Democrats, the people who've been around, you know, a election cycle or two, have a little contrarian take on some of this. Speaking of David Axelrod, remember this fella? Zooming in on this guy here. Big time Obama hombre. And Axelrod, you see here, hey, he posted on Twitter. He gave us a little bit of advice on this story. He said this today at 3:52 early in the morning. And he's referencing this New York Times article, which we are going to read here shortly. Says the title from the New York Times is January 6 hearings give Democrats a chance to recast the midterm message. What? So you mean this is like a political rally? Oh, yeah, it is. Got it. And so the New York Times wrote a whole story about that, which we'll skim through here in a minute. But David Axelrod was referencing this, and he was saying, uh-oh, guys, if I were a member of the 1-6 committee, stories like these, casting the hearings as a political cudgel, would make me very unhappy. Conversely, ours, Republicans, who hope to dismiss damning findings as partisan, will seize on them. True. Let the facts speak for themselves. Yeah, that's pretty wise, actually, right? Not a bad concept, but I don't think that those mechanics are necessarily relevant anymore, right? We're in a different system now. And isn't this interesting, just how much this shows sort of how much we've deviated even from the Obama era, right? Like, this is an actual pseudo criminal investigative body that was created by a political party, highly partisan in Congress. They're openly sort of advocating that this is a chance to change the narrative, to recraft the midterm message, recast the midterm message. Because all the policies have failed. I mean, they have to latch onto this thing. And you have an old Obama acolyte, somebody coming out and saying, not that good, guys, because this is all going to potentially backfire because you're making it political. Because it is political. So that's his advice to them. Now, he is referencing this New York Times article. Let's take a quick look at it. Normally, I don't like to spend too much time, you know, on this website, but here it is. The New York Times tells us the January 6 hearings give Democrats a chance to recast the midterms. With their majority at stake, Democrats plan to use the 6 high-profile hearings. We're getting 6 of these things? To refocus voters' attention on Republicans' role in the attack. So is it about Trump? Is it about accountability? Is it about insurrection? Is it about American democracy? Is it about Proud Boys or Oath Keepers or any of that crap? No, it's about Republicans and their role in the attack. And it's about winning the midterm elections. Okay, from the New York Times. I didn't write it. They wrote it. Here's what they say. Annie Carney and Luke Broadwater. 17 months after a mob, right? Same point I've been screaming about, 500 days, a year and a half, 17 months. After this all happened, Democrats plan to use a landmark set of hearings beginning this week to try to refocus voters' attention on January 6, aiming to tie Republicans directly to an unprecedented plot to undermine democracy itself. This is in America. This is one political party trying to use these hearings to castigate an entire political party. It's insane. Like, honestly, when we look back at the McCarthy era and we go, wow, how could we do that to, that was kind of crazy, the Red Scare and all this. We'll look back, it's going to be the same era. We'll fast forward. We'll take a look back on the decaying congressional bodies or whatever we have left of this country and the political bodies, right? And we'll make sure to reflect upon them and we'll say, what happened here? We let our political parties open actual committees and full-blown nationally televised hearings based on a fake committee on an incident that lasted 6 hours 17 months ago. And the entire media was complicit in this. And they are now, okay, it's not just about what happened that day. They've expanded the scope. They've expanded the hula hoop. We talk about this in law all the time because both sides are fighting over the space. What's inside the hula hoop, what's outside the hula hoop. That boundary is very, very, very important. Sometimes it's critical to winning or losing. Here, same story. And it's not good. Story continues, with their control of Congress hanging in the balance, Democrats plan to use made-for-television moments and a carefully choreographed rollout to castigate all of the Republicans. 6 hearings are going to remind the public of the magnitude of Trump's effort to overturn the election. And they're saying that the coming midterm elections are a chance to hold Republicans accountable for it. Republicans, you may not have even been there on January 6th. You may have been saying that was really bad. And maybe you didn't even vote for Donald Trump, but you're a Republican and now you're to blame. Why? Just because you're a Republican, just because you're red. It's horrible. And the New York Times is openly writing about it. It's like, this is crazy. It is an uphill battle at a time when polls show that voters' attention is focused elsewhere, like things on, like, I don't know, inflation, corona, gas prices, but Democrats argue the hearings will give them a platform for making a broader case about why they deserve to stay in power. It's naked and open. It's not about accountability or Trump or any of that. They're Democrats running for Congress who weren't even in Congress on January. Like, it's a whole new game. And they're still going to use it. When these hearings are over, voters will know how irresponsibly complicit Republicans were. Okay, so at least there we get a little bit of like a modifier, like a limiting principle, right? The word complicit. That means that they're at least thinking like you had to have some active role in the insurrection. Complicit Republicans, right? At least there's a limiting principle on that. Previously, it's like, well, just Republicans in general. If you even think that you're a Republican, you're an insurrectionist, which is the slow roll that we've been following for 17 months now. That came from Democratic Representative Patrick Maloney, Democratic campaign chair. The select committee investigating the attack, made up of seven Democrats and 2 Republicans, say it's approached its work in a sober, apolitical manner, and they're going to present their findings as such. But it's clear that the hearings, according to the New York Times, coming 5 months before the midterms elections, in which Democrats are bracing for big losses, carries high political stakes. The hope among Democrats is the committee's findings will blow the roof off the house, they say. They've retained an experienced television executive to ensure the Epstein cover-up boy, to ensure that happens. They're facing an onslaught from Republicans who are bent on denying, downplaying, and obfuscating the truth of what happened in their own messaging operation. Look, there's a lot of people doing that. Certainly, I am one of the people in their categorization, probably somebody who would be doing all of those, denying, downplaying, obfuscating the truth, so on and so forth. And that's a scary thought, isn't it? That if I present a conflicting narrative to their narrative, if you're a Republican and you say, maybe I think that there were a lot of feds involved in this. Everywhere we look, they're feds. Oath Keepers indicted. Guess who was there? Ray Epps. Best friends with Stuart Rhodes, leader of the Oath Keepers, who's got a history of working with the feds. Same story with the Proud Boys. Enrique Tarrio, former prolific FBI Fed investigator. Everywhere we turn, they're all over the place. So if we present a different narrative, does that mean we're downplaying, denying, or obfuscating the truth? We only have to comport to their narrative? Otherwise, we're insurrectionists? And I think most Republicans are useless, at least the elected ones, most of them. Democrats are up against the reality that raw emotions have faded in the aftermath of the attacks. Even among voters who care about the facts, attention has turned to World War III, Ukraine, gun violence, and a deep pessimism about the state of the economy. And so their task is to persuade voters that the attack revealed a bigger and more important issue at stake, including the Republican Party's alignment with violent extremists and its decision to make the big lie a campaign test. A significant portion of the hearing on Thursday will focus on the Proud Boys, which we spent all day yesterday talking about. Remember, the Proud Boys are on the mind map. And I speculated that it was very convenient timing yesterday. Turns out that was accurate. They got indicted on Monday. They needed more people with seditious conspiracy. We spent some time yesterday looking at all of the actual cases that have been charged in this ordeal, and there was about 796 as of yesterday. We did a total calculation. It was 12 people with seditious conspiracy, and there was another, I think after the Proud Boys got indicted, there's going to be another 6. So we'll be up to like 17 total seditious conspirators out of 796 defendants. We looked through the charges yesterday. Most of those were actually just basically trespass charges. Okay. If you took it out of the Capitol building and put it in your local downtown night environment, trespass. That's all that happened. And they got charged, with felonies. One guy, one of the Proud Boys guys, which I forgot to take a screenshot of yesterday, which was great, was actually charged. Right, one of the counts for the assault of the officer, if we recall, was actually throwing a water bottle, right, which is a really, really scary thing for him. Yeah. So here, count 8 was for all 5 defendants. And if you look, it says throwing a water bottle at law enforcement. That is assaulting officers, okay, throwing a water bottle. So not only that, but Enrique Tarrio is also a former FBI informant, if not a current FBI informant. We got all that news over from Reuters. They gave us the details on it, telling us that he had worked in many, many instances, cooperating with local federal law enforcement agencies in aiding, prosecuting other cases like marijuana grow houses, pharmaceutical operations, and various fraud schemes. Okay, so this guy, right, another Fed, or at least former Fed. So all of this is going to be very, very conveniently orchestrated to time with the hearing. So they got indicted on Monday, which means they can talk about it now on Thursday. So you see here, far-right group members, they were just charged because they've got a hearing coming up, so you better get them charged. Liz Cheney, she's like got her dress laid out. She's got her note cards. She's got, all of her different stupid sayings, like this was very serious. This was highly orchestrated. She's going to say chilling a lot, probably chilling. You put that on your bingo card. And so she's just gearing up, ready to go. And she's going through her checklist. She forgot the Proud Boys indictment. So she gets on the phone with Merrick Garland and she says, "Hey, Mayor, did you indict them yet?" And he's like, "Oh, I knew I forgot something. When's the hearing?" She says, "It's Thursday." And he says, "Oh, I think I can get it done by then. Give me a minute." He sends it over to his agents and they go from there. Testimony is scheduled from a documentary filmmaker. So they've actually got some filmmakers here. Nick Custed is here, says who was embedded with the group during the storming of the building is going to be there. So we got some testimony from live people who were there. The goal is to provide the public with a more in-depth portrait of what unfolded on January 6th than the images that played out on television. So I don't know how they're going to rub our heads in it even harder. I mean, for crying out loud, there's only so much you can do through a television screen, right? There's only so much that you can shove into our faces. So we'll see what they come up with. But here's another, this is probably another bingo card one. Coordinated multi-step effort, right? You're going to hear a lot of language like that. Conspiracy, highly organized is probably going to be another one, bingo card. And prevent the transfer of power. definitely get, undermining democracy, bingo, right? Norman Eason was hired by the Judiciary Committee, serves as special counsel, says they need to have three things: the attention-grabbing power of new evidence, the spontaneous drama created by live witnesses, and the oldest trick in the book, telling a good story, which means they're doomed. Because have you seen these people? Have you listened to them? They can't tell a story for anything. They are elected politicians. Look at these people. They're going to come out and tell a convincing story? No, they're not. They're going to rely on the witnesses to do it, and we'll see what they can do. We have here Osario, different founders. In an attempt to keep the hearing from becoming too dry and disconnected from the visceral reality of the attack, the committee is tentatively planning to play the video of the Capitol attack and considering airing clips of key testimony from high-profile witnesses like Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, right? So if they play those videos, man, this could be very interesting because I'll be very curious to see what they say. But look at this. This is so, it's unbelievable. As it tries to deliver the equivalent of Watergate hearings for the streaming era, the committee has brought on the former president of ABC News, Epstein cover-up boy, James Goldston, a move reported earlier by Axios, to help fit the hearings into 6 tight episodes. It's a TV show running between 90 minutes and 2.5 hours. It's a limited series on Netflix. Okay, that's literally what this is. It might even be on Netflix at some point in time. Republican lawmakers have already begun pushing a counter narrative to dismiss the hearings as nothing more than political theater, which is true. Elise Stefanik from New York, she's out talking a lot about this. The committee has not yet nailed down the full slate of witnesses. And we'll see what's going on. All right, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, the one thing that I didn't think about as I was reading this is if they play I'm not sure what it depends on what they play. If they play some of the more violent stuff, then you might not get away with playing that on YouTube. So here's part of the problem, right? If they get too violent, then people can't repost some of the stuff, because YouTube might flag that as being 18 plus. And then you're going to have content creators that don't want to put it on their channel because they get flagged and it's a big problem. So you have to sort of balance the fine line between provocative and, visceral. They want that reaction, but they also want shareability, right? So if you share some of the violent clips, and honestly, I think most people are desensitized to it at this point. I mean, how many of those have we seen for 17 months? A lot of them. We'll see. Now, I'm very excited to see what they come up with. I think it's probably going to be terrible. And that's because I've seen them in action, and they're all not even very charismatic. I mean, they're pretty bland. I mean, Pencil Neck, have you seen him on TV? He looks like this, and it's got a pencil neck. I mean, it's really difficult to listen to the guy. All right, so that's an update on what's going on. Now, Fox News is not going to be airing it. David Axelrod says, hey, Democrats, maybe take it easy with your cartwheels over there because this whole thing may backfire. A lot of other problems in this country than a 6-hour delay in the certification of Joe Biden, okay, that many people have buyer's remorse on anyways. The last thing that many Americans are going to want is for you to say how offended everybody is that Joe Biden almost wasn't the president. I think a lot of people are kind of like, well, can we have that option now? Because if we could have that option now, we might take it. I'm not sure. All right, a couple quick additions to the mind map before we jump into the actual amicus that came in from Kevin McCarthy. Here we saw Ray Epps was actually a big focus. Now, I've got a bunch of videos that I have not uploaded yet, but I did start with some things. Remember, this was the actual screenshot of Ray Epps that showed up in Senate testimony. Ted Cruz asked about this some time ago, and this was the scene, right? That was what we were talking about yesterday, and our boy Vientikis sent over the video. We found it on Rumble yesterday and played some of it, but those were the screenshots. Actually, that's probably the same video. Ted Cruz probably watched the same thing. Look, that's from Rumble. And so that's what we were talking about in the Proud Boys indictment yesterday. Reading through this, they said specifically that this guy, who was known to the grand jury, Who would that be? They didn't name him, saying it was Ray Epps, but they said somebody. This was the first breach point. Like, this is where it all started, on this side at the Capitol building. This is the first perimeter where you see the violence sort of start. And there's Ray Epps. And they're saying that he's not involved in this. Ray Epps, of course, as we know, was originally on the list of the FBI's most wanted before they removed him. He was like item number 16, and then they pulled him off of there. And Ted Cruz asked the FBI and the DOJ about this. We had these two clips here, right? This is a quick clip. Not going to play the whole thing, but just get a taste of what was happening with Ray Epps.
Public posts seeking information on individuals connected with violent crimes on January 6th. Among those individuals, in the bottom there, is Mr. Epps. The FBI publicly asked for information, offering cash rewards leading to information leading to the arrest. This was posted, and then sometime later,
FBI had him on there, right? He was down there, and then you fast forward.
Mr. Epps disappeared from the public posting.
Not there
According
anymore.
to public records, Mr. Epps has not been charged with anything. No one's explained why a person videoed urging people to go to the Capitol, a person whose conduct was so suspect the crowd believed he was a Fed, would magically disappear from the list of people the FBI was looking at.
Yeah, it's a great question. Ted Cruz, is sometimes on the money, and he got it right. Now, if you recall, a lot of this was from that hearing where we listened to this woman. I think that's Jill Sanborn, if I recall. Her and some other, guy from the FBI were sitting there, and they're like, well, domestic violent extremism is the biggest threat in America. We're really scared about it. And so we're going to create this new Homeland Security Committee that's only focused on DVEs, domestic violent extremism, and we lampooned them over that for quite some time because they're really, really pretty terrible at their job. So that's what's going on with Ray Epps. We've got those two updates. I will continue to add videos, and basically sort of the idea, one of the ideas here is that this can sort of be useful as a tool, right? As we're going through the January 6th useless committee hearing on Thursday, and they start bringing out all of these topics like, oh, this is an insurrection. Well, we can go to the mind map ideally and say, well, what does insurrection mean again? And where's the link where it says how many people were charged with insurrection? Oh, 0. Got it. And, you can sort of reference this as a tool so that it's useful in combating their terrible arguments, which is what we started doing yesterday, where we started to lump these into categories, right? Bingo card, fight, saying Trump incited an insurrection. That's going to be on there. Ongoing threats, conflating legal mechanisms with investigating your legal rights with being an insurrectionist, right? All of these things are going to be brought up, and we can categorize the arguments, and you can see how easily they are dismantleable because they're just useless. I mean, it's been 17 months. They're acknowledging by their own writings in their own newspapers that this is all a political stunt. It's all just for a midterm campaign. And when that's what your arguments are, we're going to see it's mostly emotions, right? It's going to be a lot of violent videos, a lot of, typical stuff. So it shouldn't even be that complicated. And we'll have some fun with it. Anyways, so, okay. A couple other updates. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing here because it's from Tucker's show, and I'd encourage you to go watch his show. But he did have Peter Navarro on his show very recently. And I want to play a quick clip from this. Let's see here. And because Navarro was actually talking about, and Tucker posted this on Twitter. I mean, he sort of wants you to share it. But Navarro comes on and gives us just a brief update on what's happening.
Which was not my privilege to waive. That's Donald Trump's privilege to waive. So I did my duty to the president. I did my duty to this country. And here we sit. And the civil suit I filed, Tucker, I hope will be historically important because there's really two constitutional issues here at stake. The first, with this weaponization of Congress's investigatory powers, is a clear violation of the separation of powers in our Constitution.
Arguments.
The legislative branch is not supposed to be the judge, jury, and execution. I heard one of your commentators there when you played that clip. The purpose was to punish Peter Navarro. That's not their role. That's the judiciary's role. So
it's a good argument. Separation of powers. I mean, I think this ultimately goes back to the underlying issue, which is that the committee is not lawfully created. Okay, we have a separation of powers for a reason. Extremely important concept. And you want the executive branch to do executive branch things, which is like prosecuting crimes. You want the legislative branch to pass laws, and you don't want them to pass laws and then enforce the laws, because there's no separation there. And you can see how there could be a very big conflict of interest where they pass laws that they want to see enforced and they just do it, right? You want a little separation there because you want the executive to maybe have a different take on that law and say, well, that seems like it might be unconstitutional, so maybe I'm not going to enforce it or whatever. Then you have the judiciary that explains and mediates between the two and says, this is what the law is. But when you have a situation like this, where, basically the DOJ through Merrick Garland and the Biden people are complicit with January 6ers on the J6 committee, it's all one big monolithic entity. And so they're going to actually pull themselves out of the legislative branch. Okay. They're sort of an extra powerful committee that operates with, they have hierarchy, right? They have power over these other Republicans. Remember, folks, we talked about this yesterday. The committee, these Democrats sent subpoenas to fellow congressional Republicans, right? Basically implying that they are higher up in the hierarchy. The Democrats on the committee get to go seize their fellow Republicans or their fellow Congresspeople, all of their records, which is insane because that's not supposed to happen, right? Speech and debate, all of this is supposed to be sort of protected and privileged, but this committee has created itself, given themselves a bunch of power, and now they're going and investigating their opponents. And as I said previously, the Republicans, if they have any stones at all, if they want to survive, they'll do the same thing back to them when they get in power. I wouldn't hold my breath on that, but I still think that you'll see a different breed of Republicans who say, okay, I do want to be in power. I really, really want that congressional seat. And this is what I'm willing to do to get it. And if the Democrats are willing to cross these lines and create their own committees, well, why don't the Republicans do it and use the levers of power just as the Democrats do? Horrible for America, terrible way to govern a functional society, but that left a long time ago. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, Navarro, right, he's communicating this issue. The big issue, I think, that invalidates the subpoenas. If you invalidate the subpoenas, then you invalidate the crime. The crime was not complying with the subpoenas. So if you say the subpoenas were unlawfully executed because the entire committee is unlawful, well, now the crime just evaporates. And so that's sort of where I think a lot of this will lie. And I think we're going to see that argument a lot more, honestly. I think it's probably the best argument. Like, if the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court takes a look at this, that's a foundational problem with the whole thing. And I still haven't seen a good answer as to why they don't need to do what the law says they need to do. Haven't seen that. If there's a good explanation for this, I'd love to see it. But that was what took place with Peter Navarro. And so the full clip from Tucker is on Tucker's Twitter, or you can check out the mind map at j6mindmap.com if you want to follow along. Of course, Peter Navarro got indicted, and we covered that at length. We talked about the Steve Bannon subpoenas, and so I think that's what's left for us today on this program before I have to jump. As I said, I had a hard stop today. It's Tuesday, and so I've got some afternoon stuff to attend to. But McCarthy, now, as we talked about previously, Trump just endorsed him. He responded to the producer of the J6 hearing coming up on Thursday saying, you are a little Epstein cover boy, aren't you there, Mr. Goldston? And he also submitted a brief in Steve Bannon's case. And so he sent 2 documents over, and I think this is the first one that we want. Yeah. This is the motion for leave to file the amicus curiae brief. Now, this is sort of a friend of the court brief. And they're saying, look, Your Honor, I'm not a party to this case. Okay, this is a criminal case. Steve Bannon's been charged here. You see this here. And Kevin McCarthy is not even in the caption. He's not a part of this case at all. But he says, all right, Judge, got to explain a couple things. As the court is aware, General Counsel to the U.S. House of Representatives, guy's name is Douglas Letter, submitted a hand-filed motion with the clerk of the court seeking leave to file an amicus brief. This is saying, Judge, I want to share some information with you. And also on May 10th, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives issued a press release highlighting this amicus. Speaker Pelosi advised the public that they filed an amicus. And so they're asking, this is asking for permission to file the brief. Now, I don't want to spend any time on this. I forgot. This is all pretty bland and boring. Let's take a look at the actual brief itself. This is 15 pages. This is the brief of Kevin McCarthy and Stephen Scalise, right? And these two guys are, of course, recipients of the subpoenas from the January 6th committee. They got those subpoenas that we talked about previously. And they're sending in this amicus. They're saying the big argument, look at this argument number A. The competence of the House Select Committee requires 13 members. Look at that argument. Boom, right there. Ranking minority member is a term sufficiently ambiguous to meaning it's making it non-justiciable. Adherence to the House rules is a predicate, necessary predicate to criminal prosecution. Love this, right? It's exactly what I was just saying. It's perfect. Saying you can't even prosecute us if the House committee is fake, if it's illegal. Let's see how this goes. It says introduction and statement of interest. Okay, McCarthy, Scalise, bring this in here. We're articulating our position. They're identifying a case from Watkins. This is a Supreme Court case from 1957, Justice Frankfurter. Justice Frankfurter writes, the power of Congress to punish for contempt of its authority is rooted in history. It's been acknowledged by the Supreme Court since 1821. Until 1857, Congress was content to punish for contempt through its own process. By the Act of 1857, Congress provided, in addition to the pains and penalties now existing, referring to the congressional contempt power, saying they're refusing to answer questions shall be a misdemeanor against the United States. By thus making the federal judiciary the affirmative agency for enforcing the authority that underlies the congressional power, Congress necessarily brings into play the specific provisions of the Constitution relating to the prosecution of offenses and those implied restrictions. Okay, so he's just quoting. All right, let's read through the actual brief now. Let's see. Here we see, McCarthy and his attorneys are arguing that the court needs to take, you see this, judicial scrutiny of what the House rules established and whether they followed them. So remember, backing up just a little bit, we talked about the fake select committee being created through H.R. 503, a House resolution saying you have the power to create this committee. It said 13 members shall be on there, not may, not could be, not if it feels okay, not if Nancy Pelosi is still sober, then we do this. None of that. Shall. 8 shall be from the majority party, 5 from the minority party, equals 13. And they had to do that. So what this motion is saying, or this amicus is saying, is that the court needs to scrutinize those rules, saying there's no basis for invoking sanctions to punish a witness when an inquiry was never properly authorized in the first place. And they give us some citations from another court proceeding. They say here, Your Honor, the letter general counsel seeks to elaborate on the legitimate legislative purpose and the authority of the House Select Committee, saying the counsel's interference with the judiciary's affirmative agency is improper. This amicus now addresses the House general counsel's assertion that, here we go, that it does not require all 13 members. So that's what they're saying. They're saying it doesn't require all 13 members in order for it to function. What a scam. The House general's assertion that Representative Cheney, by virtue of being the first minority party member appointed to the committee, is the senior ranking minority member. These people are the biggest scammers. So they're saying, look, because they couldn't comply with the rules, they're changing the rules to comply with what they have. Oh my gosh. What a joke. It's like in the movies when the kids are playing cards and something like that. And they're like, well, what cards do you have? He's like a 7, a 4, and a 2, and an ace. And you go, well, that's nothing. And he says, well, I win. And you say, well, why is that? And he says, well, because that's what I've got. And he's 4 years old. And so you say, okay, well, you win. And that's because he changed the rules to fit what he has. It's exactly what happened here. The fake January 6th Select Committee, they couldn't get 13 people, and they certainly couldn't get 5 Republicans, and they couldn't get the majority party person to actually, the minority party person to actually appoint them. in a way that was satisfactory to Nancy Pelosi. And so they just said, well, we've got these two fake Republicans called Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. That'll do, won't it? And that's all they did. And then now they're saying, well, we don't need those 13 anyways. Did they read it? It says shall, okay? It doesn't say may. It's not even complicated. So they're changing the rules. Here, oh, look, here, they got that right there. they read my mind. House resolution provides the speaker shall, not may, not, close enough, shall appoint 13 members, 5 of whom shall be appointed after consultation with the minority leader. So it's equitable, okay? So there's a balance. You say 8 versus 5, little bit difference of a balance of power than 7 versus 2. It's undisputed, according to McCarthy, that the Speaker of the House failed to appoint 13 members of the Select Committee. Not even a question. In its post hoc attempt to defend its contempt referral, they say that the language does not require, quote, all 13 members be appointed in order for it to function. And they cite a ruling of the district court saying that if the court reads shall as mandatory, it would be ruling differently than the House itself, and it would be effectively making the rules. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is really good. I'm running out of time on this because I've got to jump in about 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that we hit some of those super chats that came in. But failure, says McCarthy, to appoint 13 members of the Select Committee deprives the committee of its competence, and no criminal prosecution arising from the conduct before the committee can lie. They're referencing all these circuit court opinions. Indeed, the House Speaker herself has acknowledged the unprecedented approach to forming the committee, and it is therefore not at all extraordinary that the House failed to contemplate the possibility of less than 13 members, right? So basically, it sounds like the lower level district court said, look, they're your rules, so you figure it out, right? We're not going to, if we change the rules for you, that means we write the rules. And so the court's not going to allow that to take place because then they become the legislative branch, right? The court doesn't want to usurp the role of the legislative body, become the rule makers. And so they're not going to do that. It's your stupid house. You figure out what the rules are. We don't know what they are. If we change them, that means we wrote them. So you people figure it out. And so they send it back over to Congress, and Nancy Pelosi says, well, that's good enough for us. So we're just going to keep moving forward. And they send it over to their Department of Justice people, and the DOJ is Merrick Garland and Joe Biden. They all want this to happen. So they say, yeah, no problem with that. We'll honor what your committee says is true. You say it's a contempt referral. You write up the documents, send it over to our team. We take it and process it, and we indict your political enemies. You see how that works? It's like an assembly line. It's beautiful. They have this whole thing concocted. But they're citing a lot of case law saying that's not quite appropriate. They're saying, alternatively, that House resolution is too vague for judicial interpretation, and if a court can't find what it means, then the court basically sends it back to the House. They say the House is not without recourse, Judge. The House Speaker could appoint all 13 members to the Select Committee as was dictated by Congress. They could do that. Or the House could go back through this and amend the resolution to specify whether the 13 members is required. They could go back and change that. They are the House after all. Why don't they just appoint the full people? We have a legally constituted body. Or if they want the shall language gone, if they want it to be may, if they want it to be if Nancy Pelosi is above a 0.20 or below a 0.20, then we have a different number of representatives. They can do that. What the White House may not do is disregard the precept of the Constitution, the plain language of the resolution as it is passed. It says shall, it's very clear, and substitute its own. Okay, Nancy Pelosi is now more powerful than the entire House. So that's the rest of this document. We see they're saying Nancy Pelosi is just by virtue of being a minority party member is the ranking member, right? She fits, so they change the rules to accommodate. They sign on the last page. This comes over from an attorney out of DC, Brand Woodward. And he closes, he says, for nearly 250 years, the experiment of our democracy has persisted despite the frequent challenges to, quote, the genius that is the doctrine of the separation of powers inherent in our Constitution. Marbury versus Madison, 1803 case, very important case out there. says the powers of the legislature are defined and limited, and that those limits may not be mistaken or forgotten. The Constitution is written. It is with great appreciation for the judiciary's assumption of the responsibility for enforcing the authority that underlies the congressional power to punish for contempt. House Minority Leader submits this amicus for consideration. All right, so it's pretty good. I actually think that's a pretty good amicus, and I actually, wholeheartedly agree with those arguments. Same arguments I've been making for months, and it's nice to see those in writing. And I think we just learned something about what the committee was doing. I didn't know what the actual committee was doing because it's so obvious on its face. It says shall. So how are they justifying that they didn't need to comport with that? Well, they just said, we have enough. We don't need a full tank of committee members. We got 7. That's good enough. That'll get us there. And they left it at that. All right. And so, my friends, that was a lot of coverage of some January 6th updates. Now let's zoom back out and see what we've got. And here, oh, look at these tentacles. It just keeps growing day in and day out. If you want to follow along at home, j6mindmap.com. Go check that out, and you can really poke around and explore. We'll continue to add to this. Like I said, I've got a bunch of videos that I have sort of downloaded and synced over the years now that we've been covering this that I will upload. And then this will be the jumping off board for our reaction and our response to what happens on Thursday. We'll be able to just bounce around and have a sort of an encyclopedia, an inventory of all the refutations of all the claims being made on Thursday, and I hope you join us for that. So we have a few more minutes left before I have to jump into the next meeting for the day. Let's take a look at some of these super chats and your comments really that came in over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com and of course from our friends on YouTube. And so I saw just a couple today, which I'm very appreciative of. We had Tara Raynar, that was yesterday, says we watched that on Rumble. We were talking about, she referenced a vote presentation in Arizona yesterday. That was from Tara Rayner. Thank you, Tara. Mark Owens saying support with a dono today from Mark Owens. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that one. Beth Coddington is in the house. And Beth Coddington says, hey, Robert, in the process of moving, but took off just for you, my dear, which is just, I'm flattered, Beth. Stop it. You're going to make me blush here on camera. Stop it, Beth. And moving's not, so that's a whole thing. So good luck to Beth, everybody out there. We'll send our thoughts your way, Beth, because moving, it's a big pain in the butt. Hopefully you're doing it peacefully. Hopefully, there's no frustrations that cause you to need a defense lawyer or anything like that. The moving guys, drop something and, things can get a little tense over there. So Beth Coddington is moving, and Beth also submitted saying, let's ban hemp with 3 exclamation points. Was I talking about hemp? I don't even know where that comes from, Beth. I'm totally blanking on why that's relevant, or why we should be banning hemp. I don't know. Did I say that or something? I don't know. But that's from Beth Coddington. Thank you, Beth. I'll have to circle back on that one, like Jen Psaki. Sean Wookie is here, says, please point out AOC talking to the insurrectionists, from Sean Wookie. And that's AOC, right? That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, I don't know. Did she talk to them? Was she out there on J6? You're going to have to fill me in on that one, Sean Wookie. I don't know what that one's about. AOC, she's all over the place. And everybody's an insurrectionist now. So it's hard to also tell who you're referencing. But thank you, Sean. Jenny B's here, says, will they have a drag queen show during the premiere? And will they talk about the 2 MAGA women who were murdered by the police? So that's a good question, Jenny B. That might be, probably more people would watch that. That stuff's really popular these days. I see it all over the place. And maybe more people would tune into that. There's sort of, different strokes for different folks. And some people, I guess, look, I don't know. People are going to be, let me just say, people are going to be very excited for this thing on Thursday. Not me, other than to mock them, but there's going to be a lot of very excited people. And the 2 MAGA women who were murdered by the police, I don't know what that was about. Oh, yes, Ms. Boyland. We talked about Ms. Boyland. No, they're not going to talk about them. No. Not at all. I'm curious to see if they'll talk about Brian Sicknick, actually, right? Because that was a big, big theme, a big narrative, but that was sort of disproven through the coroner's report. We learned a lot more about that story, and we'll see if they continue to try to bring that back up. But thank you for that, Jenny B. Turd Ferguson's here. Says, what happens if they show images of 1/6 defendants who have been found not guilty? What about defendants who pled to lesser charges? Doesn't this taint jury pools for defendants who haven't had their trials yet? Yeah, it's a great point, Turd. It's a great point. It's very, very astute observation. And all true. Yeah, but the big problem here is that this is Washington, D.C., and they don't really care about any of that, evidently. So, yeah, I mean, for example, okay, I just saw that. Remember Derek Chauvin and his case? So here's a quick example of like a compare and contrast. Okay, so this is a great question for Turd. We like to take a look at different situations in different parts of the country and see if they are operating in similar ways. And if they're not, we can identify the variables and say, oh, that's weird. This is doing this differently than this. Okay. Here we've got one situation. Turd Ferguson is talking about January 6 defendants, right? They're in Washington, D.C. They've got a trial coming up. It's a very newsworthy event. And so we've got those characteristics flushed out. Now, let's compare and contrast those variables with another situation taking place in Minnesota. Minnesota, I believe it was. Is that where that was? George Floyd. Where was George Floyd? Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah. Okay. So now we've got in Minnesota, we have a separate situation and we're comparing and contrasting the two. And I'm looking up Tao Thao. Okay. And Turd Ferguson was asking, how do we compare and contrast the two? In Tao Thao's case, what has happened is they were scheduled for trial very soon, but these guys just got indicted and they just pled guilty in federal cases. And so there's a lot of activity about their cases. And so what did the judge do in these cases? Well, he just continued it to 2023. He pushed them way out another 7 months. Why? To let the publicity die down so that when Tao Thao and the other two co-defendants go to trial, there's not as much news out there. But for the J6ers, well, we've kind of had like what, especially in DC, I don't live there, but I can imagine 17 months of just a beating of the drum. J6ers are the worst insurrectionist enders of democracy that you've ever seen. And are the judges giving them the same benefit of the doubt that the judge in the Chauvin situation is giving to those other co-defendants? No. They're just going to say, well, go to trial and you'll lose anyways. Because it's DC. And there are two tiers of justice in this country, as of course we've talked about for a long time. Doesn't this taint the jury pools? Yes, it does. Does anybody care? Not really. John Daniel became a member. Welcome to John Daniel. And I've got some more ideas for some of the members only stuff, which I'm going to start. I got to start being a little more comfortable with, some of the things that I post, but I'm getting close. So look forward to that. Beth Coddington says, the guy who shot and hung himself, they're already banning guns. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's true. Guns are dangerous. Yeah, and, you never know. Any kid could get a gun like that, a shotgun, and just go and find a tree, a ranch 30 miles away from his home and get up there with a rope and decide he's had enough and just take his own life. And then while he's hanging there, take the shotgun out and concoct it into his chest and then reach out and pull the trigger while he's hanging there. And then we should ban all guns because of that. That's probably something that might happen. So that was from Beth Coddington. We have some comments who came in over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Jeff Rook is here saying, Rob, I've reached a point where they could tell me the nukes have launched and I'd be laughing at all the stupid reasons that we're doomed. And Biden said, and then I told Corn Pop, come on, man, just launch them. In God's name, why can't we just enact common sense nuclear Armageddon? That's from Jeff Rook. I don't think I'd believe him. Jeff, I wouldn't believe him, right? Joe Biden would come out. He's like, Russians have launched nukes. I'd be like, you liar. No, they haven't. Let me see it. No, it's fine. And then as I'm evaporating, away into a dust, my last thought would be like, wow, Joe Biden was truthful. Well, I guess that's the end of that one. Vientikis says, let's stop calling it a committee and start calling it a tribunal. Yeah, a show trial, a show tribunal, something like that I think are very good. Vientikis says, apparently there was someone on camera on J6 saying something in Russian. I've seen the video. Haven't dissected it. Of course it's Russian. The person's face matches a picture of someone in the Ukrainian military. Jeff Rook says, in reference to my question from a few streams ago about the powers that be trying to control thoughts and speech, saying there was Bolshevik rule 1921, saying, quote, thought was extinguished. People were afraid not only to speak, but to think. Ooh. Jeff Rook says, what program are you using for that mind map? Looks like something that would be useful to me. It's called MindMeister. And if you go to j6.com and j6mindmap.com, and I think if you see the mind map, you can like log in, and then you can even copy that mind map, or you can create your own, like as a template, using that as a template. I don't know how it works because I'm usually creating them, but yes, you can access it, and it's a cool program. I don't really use it for my business. That's not true. Yes, I do. I use it for my business and my life, and I use another software called Miro for flow charting and workflows in my business. And I'm having a lot of fun with that, and I'll share that with you. A couple more from Jeff, and then I've got a jet. Jeff says, family of the person people think was killed by the Clintons parrot the "we have to stop the conspiracy theories" that we always hear from the Clintons. And former LEO says, does Peter Navarro have a civil action? He does. I don't have a copy of it yet. Says, yeah, so he does have a civil lawsuit. I mean, I don't think he's going, I don't know if he's suing them individually or not, but I do want to pull that up. He has referenced it multiple times and I haven't seen it. It's a civil lawsuit. So, less in my wheelhouse, but still relevant because they're filing all of these things to try to stop the J6 committee from being the J6 committee. And so shout outs to some final commenters, Farmer's Daughter in the locals chat, Jeff Rook, Vientikis is over there. Shout out to my friends on YouTube. Thank you, K Bean. Just Cause is in the house. Shout out to Lean. We've got C Reeds in the house. And I see McGruff, Karen O. And I appreciate everybody being here. I've got a jet because I've got a meeting starting literally right now. But we'll be back here tomorrow to cover more J6 Insurrection Week stuff. And I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking before you get out of here. Have a great night, my friends. Bye-bye.